Okay, recording. So this is the lecture on monopoly. And one of the things that we said that was important in the context of competition is that in the long run, when firms in competition are earning profits, now I will say briefly again that normal economic profits are zero. So zero profits mean that the company is earning a normal rate of return. From an accounting perspective, they're earning like 6 or 7% per year above their costs, right? But they're not doing better than they could do in any other business. And that's really what the normal economic profit is about. You can invest your money in one type of business or another type of business, but if both of those types of businesses are doing about the same, then they each represent an opportunity cost of doing business in the other, if it's firm, industry A versus industry B, doing an investment and a business in industry B, the opportunity cost of that is not doing one in A. So if they're all earning about a normal rate of return, 6 or 7% per year, then the marginal investor, the one that's investing for the current business environment and trying to figure out what to do, doesn't have a reason to prefer industry B over industry A. Yogurt shops versus boba shops. Well, I'm going to earn about the same amount of money in either one, so why should I care? And so there's a normal long run equilibrium profit in that context. But if there's a type of business that's earning a supernormal profit, something above zero, that means they're really, raking in the cash. They're making 20, 30% return per year. And that encourages the marginal investor to go into or to enter that particular line of business. If it's a competitive business, they can get into it. And so I'll ask, so is there somebody who has a mic who wants to chat with me a little bit today? Come on, give me a volunteer.
Wait, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Who's talking?
Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm just checking my mic.
Okay, Lawrence, you don't want to chat with me?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll kind of come up with an example. Okay. Supernormal profits, we're saying it drives new entrants or new businesses. Can you think of anything where you were like, in the last couple of years, you're like, gosh, if I was going to invest or I was going to start a business, I would get into that because people are making tons of money. Does anybody have an idea? I have a very specific idea.
Amazon.
Okay, you say Amazon. So Amazon's pretty big. They've been around for a while, like online distribution, like Amazon Shop. Nicole says Bitcoin, Netflix. Okay, but now I want to think about this. Okay, Spencer, are you there? Do you have a mic?
Yeah, but there's yard work, so I can't talk too much.
Oh, okay.
I can talk about Netflix for a second.
Okay. So just for a second. So here's the deal, Spencer. If you were going to start a business, would you try to compete with Netflix?
Well, now, no.
No, you're thinking like if you were to buy stocks, like maybe, but I'm talking about like, let's get real. You're going to open a business, right? In the last couple of years, can you think of any type of business that you were like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm going to, I don't know, maybe not drop out of school, but like I'll go, to school, I'll pick my classes in the evenings or something like that because I want to start this business because I want to make so much money.
Oh, well, I was actually talking to my dad about it, but there's a certain connector for solar panels.
Oh, okay.
That's not super, it's not an affluent business right now, but with the rise of solar power probably going up within the next decade or so,
you think it's
this little component, it will shoot up. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would maybe want to be a supplier for that component. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a nephew and guess what he did about 5 years ago?
I have no idea.
He started selling marijuana.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right after the
Yeah,
proposition passed.
yeah. And he made a lot of money, and there are a lot of people that started up little pot shops, right? I mean, like they're all over the place right now, right? I don't know. You can still talk.
Yeah, they popped up everywhere.
Yeah. And that is entry. That is what we mean by entry, is where a bunch of new businesses start up because they're making money hand over fist. And you know what? My nephew, about a year ago, he sold his pot shops. He had like 3 of them and he sold them. And you know why? Because the competition started to get really stiff and it was hard to make a lot of money like he was making in the very beginning. So, that's what equilibrium is. You have all of these businesses that start up, selling marijuana, and then the market like gets saturated, right? And then it's like, well, you're not making any more money running a pot shop than you are running a boba shop or a pizza restaurant. Then you get normal returns. Do you see what I mean, Spencer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever see like, businesses are springing up left and right in a particular industry, then that's a sign they're super normal profits. And that draws in new businesses, or what we call entry. And I don't know if you've ever seen this or not. Have you ever seen, and actually Netflix is a good example, but not Netflix itself. Have you ever seen the collapse or the exit of a bunch of businesses because they were failing and they're not making a good rate of return?
Oh yeah. The big one I remember was watching Blockbuster go down.
Yeah, all the video stores. So
Yeah.
we used to have all these little video stores all around. And then because people started to stream and all that other stuff, that industry just collapsed. And I'm not saying there are none any place anymore, because there are probably still a few out there that maybe cater to particular clientele or something like that. We had one here that near me in Fullerton, La Habra area, where it was called Video Town, and they had 2 stores, and people had just gone there so much out of habit over the last few decades that they just closed down, like less than, I think, about a year ago. They closed their final store because finally, it got to a point where they really couldn't keep their business going. But that's what we call industry exit. So in competition and video stores and pot shops and stuff like that, those are basically competitive industries. And you see that companies that do business in those industries, they don't make money hand over fist. They're not, super profitable, but, they compete with each other. And if in the beginning they're getting started, you might see a bunch of businesses open up, and then the competition gets to a point where they split the customers so that everybody's making like a normal rate of return. And as some market condition changes, then they get out of the business. So coffee shops, pot shops, video stores, those are all really good examples of competitive industries. And there's easy entry and easy exit that drives profits to be normal in the long run. But monopolies are different. And in a monopoly, there's not really good entry and exit. It's not possible to just start up some business to compete with a monopolist, because there are barriers to entry. And that's going to be our first main point. So in terms of just talking about monopoly more generally, we'll say, well, remember, competitive firms are price takers. They just have to take the going price in the market. Monopolists are price makers. A firm's considered a monopoly if it's the only seller of its product doesn't have any close substitutes, and those are the 2 key features. And you might ask yourself, well, why do we end up with monopolies? And the primary reason is what we call barriers to entry. So there's a reason why, if the monopolist is making a lot of profit, somebody can't go in and just compete with them. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but right now, Google and Facebook, and I don't know about Netflix, I don't think they are, but are being sued by the government because they're being accused of having a monopoly position, Google in particular, in the search business. And you might say, well, why, does Google have, a special barrier to entry? Well, imagine again trying to compete with Google. You can't just go in and easily duplicate the service that they're offering. You can see that Microsoft tried to do that with Bing. Has anybody used Bing? Does anybody use Bing? Okay, how about you, Christian? You want to talk? Do you have a mic?
Isn't that like Yahoo?
Yeah. So okay. What about you, Daniel? Do you have a mic? You want to chat for a minute? Daniel Benitez or Edward? Do you want to chat with me?
I have a mic.
Okay, Daniel. So yeah, so Bing is a joke, but do you know why it's a joke?
Honestly, nobody. Google was such a bigger name. It was the first search engine to be ever used.
Yeah, but have you ever tried to use Bing? The search results stink. I mean, I dare anybody to give go try. And if you do Google, then you'll end up, with top search results that make sense right away. And Bing just gives you, like garbage.
I think Bing just gives you a generalized idea of what you're searching for. Google tailors search results based on what you search on the internet.
Yeah, well, okay, so that's another important point. Okay, so number one, Google has a special position because they have, and the reason why they became big to begin with is they have a proprietary trade secret search algorithm, right? So number one, you could say that you could copy the code, and there are actually some governmental restrictions against that. Copyright and patent issues do affect computer code too. So I'm sure, though I don't know this to be the case, but I do know that the Google search algorithm is a specialized piece of code. I don't know if you could reverse engineer it, but I'm pretty sure you'd get sued by Google if you did. I don't know if it would be a copyright or a patent infringement, but Bing basically has to use their own search algorithm. So there's a barrier to entry, and I want you guys to focus on patent and copyright because that's a law enforced by the government that means that nobody else can use a technology that's been developed by an inventor. And the people that started Google are the ones that developed the search algorithm that Google uses. That's number one. That gives Google a special position in the market. The other thing is what you guys said, and it's kind of hard to figure this out, but because Google has so much of the traffic already, they're able to filter that with their algorithm to give more accurate search results. They just basically have more data available to them than Bing and Yahoo and the other search engines. So, and obviously Google doesn't have an incentive to share those search results and their data with their competitors. So Google does have a barrier to entry that makes it difficult for other companies that want to get involved in search to also, produce a product of similar quality to theirs. So the main barriers to entry are ownership of a key resource. In this case, you could say that Google's key resource is the data that it has on prior searches that it can leverage to make future searches better, right? Normally, ownership of a key resource, a lot of people have talked about things like gold and diamond mines. And, obviously, if you're the only one that owns a diamond mine, then you have a monopoly in diamonds. And it may actually be unfamiliar, but if you were at all curious about this, one of the classic examples of monopoly is the De Beers Diamond Cartel. So it turns out that this company called De Beers owns the vast majority of all the diamond mines in the world because they're centered if you guys have ever seen blood diamonds. They're centered in Africa, but particularly in South Africa, there are some very, very rich diamond mines that are owned by De Beers. And, you know, I mean, if you want to compete in the diamond business with De Beers and you don't have a diamond mine, you know, you just can't. So, but the De Beers diamond cartel or monopoly is a very, very interesting case. If you guys wanted to look it up, one of the things that I find interesting is that, and are you still with me, Daniel? Are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, check this out. So De Beers actually has what they call diamond fields. Okay. So imagine how cheap it is for them to produce diamonds, because by a diamond field, they mean that the diamonds are laying on the surface of the ground. So they can walk and, you know, you'd see like a dirty rock and, you know, just split that rock open and there's a diamond. What do you think about that?
That's insane. That's honestly insane.
Yeah. So yeah, it makes it really difficult because most of the other diamond mines in the world, like they have some in Canada, but they have to drill down, you know, deep in this hard rock to find these diamonds. But De Beers just got, you know, the lucky spot, and they have these diamond fields where they have raw diamonds sitting really close to the surface of the ground. It's just a unique resource. So they have a special position in the market because of that. And this is normally what happens. Most monopolies are created by the government, and that's when the government gives a firm an exclusive right to produce some good. Normally, they do that through patent and copyright law. Again, if you're an inventor and you apply for a patent, then the patent, and actually patents are part of the U.S. Constitution, gives you exclusive rights for about 17 years to be the sole producer of something that you've patented. A lot of times it's in pharmaceutical and, you know, technical areas these days, but historically, you know, every person who invented a little machine or something like that could patent it. And then if somebody tried to copy them, then that company that was copying them could be sued, and all the profits would go back to the company that invented the patented device. And again, that's the government enforcing it through the legal system, this you know, privilege to produce a certain good. The other thing that the government sometimes does, and we'll talk about this a little bit later towards the end of the chapter, is when it comes to public utilities, so like cable companies, the gas company, the electric company, it's very common for the government to give utilities a territory. So for example, we have Southern California Edison here, where I live in Fullerton. So, you know, it's not like I can go buy my electricity from some other electricity provider. It's, you know, the territory for Southern California Edison. And the government, normally they're called regulated utilities. The government gives those utilities a territory and makes them the exclusive provider in that area. So that's the most common source of monopoly. And then this last one is normally what people think about when they think about monopoly, is they think, oh my gosh, there's some technology that involves producing at a massive scale that reduces the costs of production. So, you know, think about something like cell phones, right? You know, you have a few cell phone providers, but part of that is because once you've designed a cell phone and set up a manufacturing and assembly line, the costs of producing a cell phone get really, really cheap because you've incurred all the fixed costs. And that's the biggest part, you know, designing the chips, designing the phone, setting up the initial production line. And once you have that set up, you can just crank out these phones, and the phones themselves have a very small, what we would call marginal cost, right? A phone may only cost $3 or $4 once you've incurred all the expenses to design the phone and set up the assembly line. So if that happens in an extreme case, then one supplier can supply all units that could ever be demanded of a particular good, and can drive any other possible business that would compete with them out by just lowering the price and making it unprofitable. So, but that's, again, it is a special case, and we call it a natural monopoly when a technology provides for the opportunity to spread fixed costs and do mass production in the way that I described. But it does happen occasionally. So again, so we talk about ownership of a key resource. Again, it's relatively rare, like the De Beers Diamond Cartel, but I think in the case of Google, a good argument could be made that the data that Google has from prior searches could be a key resource that gives them a monopoly position in the market. I'm pretty sure that's what the government's doing right now, in arguing the case that Google is a monopoly. Government created monopolies are the most common ones. Again, think patent and copyright laws. And that's this slide here, so you can see it. And then natural monopolies are these ones that I talked about that have these capabilities with the thing that they're producing to produce at a massive scale at a very, very low cost, and to drive competitors out of the market. I will give you guys one example of what some people have said is a natural monopoly. So Ben Rose, I didn't say your name, but do you want to chat for a minute, Ben? Do you have a mic?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So if you want to think about like massive companies, which ones kind of come to your mind right now?
Just like firms as a whole, like a company.
Yeah. Like if you're like, oh, that company is huge.
I think mostly of like Amazon.
Yeah.
Maybe some larger retails like Walmart, Target.
Yeah, exactly. So that was exactly the two that I was looking for. But have you ever thought yourself, so like, what makes maybe Amazon, and I will go to Walmart because they're huge too. Is there anything you can think about that really gives them a special advantage in the type of business that they do?
Well, I know Amazon, it's really interesting because usually mail services aren't privatized, but they are a privatized business that does, shipping with boxes and such.
All this delivery, yeah.
So it's a new type of, we haven't really seen a lot of new privatized mail services such as Amazon.
Yeah. Well, so I what a lot of people don't understand about Amazon and Walmart is they only actually produce one thing, and that is retail services. Okay. So all of Amazon's products, I mean, they may have some private label products, but they're not in the business of actually producing those products, right? Those products are produced by some other companies. They're sold by Amazon, also on Amazon a lot of times, and Walmart now. If you go on their website and you try to buy something, they'll say it's going to be supplied by some other supplier, and they're just getting a piece of the action coming through their website, meaning they're getting a little bit of profit by facilitating that transaction. And so one could argue that retail services are a natural monopoly, because the only thing the retail service provider does, Amazon or Walmart, is provide a place and a platform, either through the web or, in the case of Walmart, in a retail environment where you can go into the store, that connects potential customers with potential sellers. And if you are a retail service provider, then your cost of facilitating that transaction between the buyer and the seller goes down the more massive the enterprise is. So it's really difficult. There's a lot of these stories about, I don't know if you've heard of any of these, Ben, but like Walmart will go into some, small place, rural place, not near a big city, and all of they call them mom and pop small stores end up getting shut down because people stop going to those small retail service providers. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, and even it, you see a lot of Walmart and Targets. They expand a lot of their goods that kind of overshadow into, or not overshadow, but maybe they kind of cross over different lines. Like maybe like Target has more, like they started to supply more sporting things. Not
Yes.
a lot, but just some sporting things, and you'll see like Sports Chalet shuts down and other
Yeah.
things like that. So they really like cross over a lot of lines that kind of roll over specific stores that have specific things.
Yeah. And so I think you get my point. My point is that if you think of what those companies are doing is really this retail service, right? Just matching buyers and sellers in different products, then you could argue that, yeah, in that kind of environment, just being big and massive means that you can do that matching between buyers and sellers at a really, really small cost. And the bigger you get, the easier it gets to match buyers and sellers in the sense that the cost of doing it goes down. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people have argued that Walmart is a retail monopolist, and I'm sure the same argument's being made about Amazon right now in online retail. So you could argue that those types of businesses are a natural monopoly. So just conceptually, we're going to talk about the costs of natural monopolies shortly, but just so when we get to natural monopoly, you'll be looking for this downward sloping cost curve. That's where we're going to go. So we'll move on. Okay. Yeah. And okay. So the way that we describe these natural monopolies are in terms of economies of scale over the relevant range of output. So remember, economies of scale have to do with this downward sloping average total cost curve. So this cost curve right here that's being exhibited has economies of scale. As the quantity of output goes up, the average total cost is falling. And if you thought about that again in the context of retail services, you might say this is what the cost of providing those retail services looks like for Walmart. As they match more buyers and sellers, their average cost of doing so is going down. Okay, so how do monopolies make production pricing decisions? That's the main topic of this chapter. And so again, we have these characteristics of monopoly. It's a sole producer. It faces a downward sloping demand curve. It's a price maker, and it reduces prices if it wants to increase sales. Remember, under competition, in contrast, right, a competitive firm is one of many producers. They, at the firm level, have a horizontal demand curve. They're a price taker. They take the market price. They can't do anything to change the price themselves. And then they sell as little or as much as they want to at that same market price. So let's go ahead and look at these things graphically, right? Now notice in panel B, and I'll go back to you for just a minute, Ben, since you're here. Are you with me, Ben?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
So you see panel B, and you see the downward sloping demand curve. Notice how this looks like the market demand curve for a competitive market. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, and it's because, remember, the monopolist actually is the whole market. And that's why their demand curve looks like the market demand curve in competition. But from an individual firm's perspective, remember, if you're a small part of a big competitive industry, then the only thing that you see is the market price, and you decide whether or not to buy or sell at that price. So that's the reason why it's not marked here in panel A, but you see where that horizontal line is, Ben?
Yeah, I see it.
That is the market equilibrium price being marked off. And if we had the industry demand and supply curves here, then where they crossed, that would be the equilibrium price. So hopefully that helps kind of orient you if you're thinking about the other graphs you've seen. So remember, total revenue, we're going to talk about firms trying to maximize profits. Monopolists want to maximize their profits too. They're a little bit different because remember, they can influence the price, whereas the competitive firm can't. But for the monopolists, we're going to first look at their total revenue, the amount of money they bring into the firm. It's going to be the price of the product times the quantity they sell. That's their total revenue. And the average revenue, remember, it's the total revenue divided by the quantity. If you take P times Q divided by Q, you just get P back. So remember, we said before that the demand curve could also be referred to as the average revenue curve. Now, the magical thing about monopoly comes when we consider marginal revenue, because marginal revenue, remember, is the change in total revenue as you change output. So in the case of a competitive firm, marginal revenue is constant because they can't influence the price. So the marginal revenue of a competitive firm is the market price. But if you look at a monopolist, so here, this is a monopolist, and we can tell it's a monopolist because it's one firm in this industry. And remember, the first two columns here are the demand schedule. And you can see that they obey the law of demand. As the quantity of water being supplied to this industry increases, you can see that the price is going down. So these first two columns are actually the demand schedule. There's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, or if the seller is going to supply that quantity, that's how much the seller could sell. So then we can calculate the total revenue by taking the quantity demanded at a particular price. And again, if the seller sold that quantity, then they would bring in the associated amount of revenue. So look at a quantity of 2 at a price of 9, the total revenue is 18. At a quantity of 3 at a price of 8, the total revenue would be 24. And then average revenue, remember, if we divide the total revenue by quantity, we just get back the price. But marginal revenue, this is different from what we saw with the competitive firm. Notice that initially, when you sell 1 gallon of water for $10 a gallon, your total revenue goes from 0 to 10. So you bring in $10 of additional revenue. That's your marginal revenue. But notice the monopolist, if they want to sell more than 1 gallon of water, right, they've got to attract an additional customer. So they have to lower the price. And in this case, they lower it to 9. And then their revenue, right, goes from 10 to 18. So how much revenue did they get from selling that extra gallon? Well, they only got $8 of revenue. And if you think about it, what happened was they originally were getting $10 for that first gallon, but in order to continue to sell it and sell one more, they had to lower the price by 1, okay? And so there's this negative, what we're gonna call price effect, that monopolists have to deal with. In order to attract more customers, they have to lower the price on all units, including that previous unit they were selling. So they're going to lose $1 of revenue from that first unit when they lower the price to 9, and then they gain an additional sale, which brings them $9, but the net amount is less than the price of the product. The net amount is only $8 of additional revenue. And then are you still with me, Ben? I'll do one other check with you.
Yeah, I'm here.
So you see, if they want to sell 3 gallons, right, they've got to lower the price to 8. And you see how now if they lower the price to 8, they're going to lose $1 of revenue on those first 2 gallons, each of them.
Yeah.
Right. So then their total revenue goes to 3 times 8 is 24. And even though the price is 8 now, they only bring in $6 additional of revenue going from 18 to 24 because they sell one more gallon at $8, but they lose $2 of revenue because they had to lower the price to attract an additional customer. You see what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the marginal revenue is always going to be less than the price that the monopolist charges. That's the main takeaway from this. And then we're going to talk about this price and quantity effect on revenue.
I have a question with
Sure.
the last part there. I don't know how much it relates to exactly the monopoly with this kind of thing, but how some retailers really like to base their prices and their quantities to be really high quantities and low charges.
Yeah,
kind
low
of
prices. Yeah.
and some other stuff like that. So how are they able to still make the revenue to be like the highest revenue?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously their goal, and we're only talking about one part of it, which is the revenue side. Their goal is to maximize profit, and profit's the difference between revenue and cost. But if you think about, I don't know if they still do it or not, but it used to be a big thing for Walmart that they had on their ads this little smiley face that would knock down the prices. And that used to be their ads all the time. So yeah, Walmart has a strategy, right, of having low prices to attract as many customers as possible. And you might say to yourself, well, gosh, like, how are they making any money? But remember, where Walmart's making money is on the transaction. So they don't make any of their products. They're making money because the companies that supply those products are willing to contract with them at as low as price as possible.
Okay.
And then Walmart makes money on each of the transactions. So if they get lots of transactions, they make lots of money.
Okay.
And so really the people, your concern is valid, but the people in this whole equation with retail services that are potentially really suffering are the suppliers, because the suppliers are in a tough position, right? They know, and Walmart's famous about this. There's a whole documentary on Walmart and Walmart actually driving suppliers out of business because they insist on such low prices for the products that they provide the customers at Walmart. And so Walmart has negotiated with companies that are suppliers, insisting on such low prices that they have caused bankruptcies in some big companies in the past. Companies are in a tough position because they know if they get into Walmart, they can sell a gazillion units, right? But because the retail opportunities are so massive, there's so many stores and so many customers in so many states, that normally the suppliers have to be very, very, very careful when they're dealing with Walmart, because if Walmart negotiates the price down too much, then yeah, they will actually lose money. And normally the only way that it works out for those suppliers is that they end up making, again, a tiny amount on a huge volume of sales, and it ends up being profitable in the end for them. But yeah, it's tough sometimes.
And I'm sure they also have to compete with even some companies like Target and Walmart when they have their own store brand that even has lower prices and competes with those brands that does higher brands as well. So it's another aspect that they do have to compete with when they start making new Walmart brand products. And stuff.
Yeah. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I just want to focus on the first part of Monopoly. Monopoly is there are no good substitutes for the product. So you have to think carefully. There aren't really a lot of good examples of products that are sold in a retail environment that are true monopolies, because there aren't that many things that are patented so there's an exclusive seller where there are no good substitutes. The best examples that we have are pharmaceutical drugs that are under patent. And I don't know if you know about any of the controversies with any of those drugs, but there are some drugs for some dangerous diseases like HIV and hepatitis C that are very, very expensive, and they're under patent. And it's not like they're really expensive to formulate. It's just that the patent laws had given the monopolists that developed those medicines the exclusive right to sell them. So we're talking about monopoly kind of casually here, but what you're talking about, where you have competition between similar products, is actually an industry structure we're going to talk about shortly called monopolistic competition. We just haven't gotten there yet. So anyway, good thinking, but we'll get there in a minute. So marginal revenue. So the monopolist's marginal revenue is always less than the price of its good. That's what we showed in the last table. The demand curve is downward sloping. And when a monopoly drops the price to sell one more unit, the revenue received from previously sold units also decreases. That's what we talked about as being this price effect. So now we're gonna give these things names. When a monopoly increases the amount it sells, it has two effects on total revenue: the output effect, which is more revenue from selling more, a higher Q, but also this price effect, which is a negative effect on revenue, which is that to attract more customers, you have to charge a lower price. So here we're going to graph the monopolist's demand curve, or also remember another name for the demand curve is the average revenue curve. And now we're going to graph the monopolist's marginal revenue curve, which you can see is below the demand curve. And these are just plots from that table that was 2 slides above, okay? So now we want to talk about profit maximization. So the key idea here is that profit maximization occurs at the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So this first bullet point is super important. That's how the monopolist is going to identify its profit maximizing quantity of the good. It's going to look where its marginal revenue crosses its marginal costs. And then there's a second piece, which is once it finds the quantity, it has to go up to the demand curve to find the price where consumers will demand that quantity. Okay, so it's different than the previous types of equilibrium that we looked at. So pay close attention. So there's the average total cost curve, there's the marginal cost curve, and there's the marginal revenue curve. Where they cross at point A here, that is the first part of the equilibrium, and it gives us the monopolist's Q max. And then once we identify that Q max, we go up the demand curve and we find the monopolist's price. Okay, so Beverly, are you here? Do you have a mic? Being a hater?
I'm here.
So did you see how this is different? We find where marginal cost crosses marginal revenue, and then we can find the quantity and the price. That's different because, right, in the case of competitive market equilibrium, we just looked where 2 curves cross, demand and supply, right?
Right.
But we can't do that anymore. Where marginal cost and marginal revenue cross just gives us the right quantity, and then we have to use that quantity to find the price from the demand curve. So it's more complicated. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any questions about that?
Don't think so.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that I pointed out and everybody understood that finding monopoly equilibrium is different. So this is really a great graph to explain that. So, okay. Now let's compare monopoly and competition. So for a competitive firm, remember the interesting thing is that marginal revenue is equal to the market price. So marginal revenue and marginal cost are equal to the market price for the competitive firm. For a monopolist, you're going to have the price coming from the demand curve. Okay, it's not going to be the competitive market equilibrium price, and it's going to be greater than the marginal revenue, and it's going to be the price associated with the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So the big takeaway from this is that in the first line, price is equal to marginal cost for competition. But for monopoly, price is going to be greater than marginal cost. That's the important thing to remember. So for monopolists, profit equals total revenue minus total cost, just like for a competitive firm. And we can go ahead and rework this equation by dividing and multiplying by Q. It's just a little trick to see the relationships a little bit differently. And what that means is we can identify as profit as being, remember, total revenue divided by Q is just price, and total cost divided by Q is average total cost. So we can represent price minus average total cost times quantity as being equal to profit. And we do that because that helps us identify what we call the profit rectangle for the monopolist. So graphically, if we want to measure the monopolist profits, then we look at the rectangle where if you look between B and C, remember B would be the monopolist price and C would be the average total cost of producing Q max. And so this rectangle has a height that's equal to price minus average total cost, and it has a width that's equal to the quantity that the monopolist sells. So the area of that rectangle is equal to the monopolist's profit. Okay. So the monopolist will receive economic profits as long as price is greater than average total cost. And again, these are going to be super normal profits. They would normally encourage businesses to enter and compete with monopolists. But again, because there's a barrier to entry, because of a patent or some special resource, it's not possible. The monopolist doesn't have to face competition and doesn't have to do anything to lower its price lower than what will maximize its profits. So here's a good example, the one that I brought up, which was the market for pharmaceuticals. Okay, here's marginal revenue, there's demand, and here is the marginal cost. So Edward, do you have a mic? I see you at the bottom of the chat.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've heard about any of the sort of tragic and disturbing stories in pharmaceutical patents. Have you heard of any of the stories? Have you heard of some guy named Martin Shkreli or any of those people?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Like I said before, there are certain diseases that you can get that are treatable, and you can think of HIV and hepatitis C as being among the ones people are most get concerned about. Do you know anything about hepatitis C? Have you heard of that?
I just heard of it, but I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, well, so it's kind of crazy. So obviously, hepatitis C is something that you get kind of like by, like HIV. It's like some, contact with somebody that involves, bodily fluid exchange or whatever, but it's pretty easy to get. But people that have, maybe a history of IV drug use or something like that. But, hepatitis C is interesting because it actually doesn't kill you, and you might have no symptoms for like 30 years. But if you live like another 30 years past the time you get infected, then eventually it causes your liver to fail. And you will get liver cancer and you will die from hepatitis C. And about 5 years ago, the only way to be cured of hepatitis C was to undergo a bunch of like blood transfusions and these very, very drugs with lots of side effects. And actually you had to be under constant treatment for like 6 months. So you're going to be bedridden 6 months, hooked up to IVs to get cured from hepatitis C, but cures were possible. And then about 5 years ago, a company developed a new medicine for hepatitis C that involves only taking 6 pills over the course of a month, right? Sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But guess how much they were charging for those 6 pills?
Like 150 or 200.
Like $50,000.
Oh, dang.
$60,000.
I was way off.
Because think about it. I mean, there are lots of people actually that have hepatitis C and don't know it. They're running around, and then all of a sudden, 20, 30 years later, like, oh my gosh, I went to the doctor, my liver is going to I'm going to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And how much would you pay, right? It's your money or your life.
Yeah.
But you know what? Those 6 pills, once you have the magic formula, the 6 pills themselves only cost like 20, 30 bucks to manufacture. So those people that have the patent on the new hepatitis C medicine, they're making an incredible amount of profit, right?
Yeah.
They mix it up for like 30 bucks. They sell it for 50, 60,000. Wow. Right?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy how someone would like even like think of charging that much.
Well, yeah, but you know why, right? So
Because people are gonna pay it.
well, yeah, because people are going to pay it, and also the thing is that most pharmaceutical companies spend billions of dollars on research and development, and a lot of their research and development projects end up in the trash can. They're losers, right? I mean, how many different medicines do you have to try to cure hepatitis C until you find one, right?
Yeah.
And so if you had spent hundreds of millions of dollars researching this thing, and then all of a sudden you find the magic formula, well, you're trying to get paid not just for, the $30 that you spend on making the pills with the magic formula, but you're trying to get paid for all the development costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty tricky. When government regulators look at this kind of thing, it looks, sort of unfair and gross from one perspective, but if they don't let the companies charge whatever is the market value, what people are willing to pay for it, then the companies don't have an incentive to do any more research, right? Because you're not going to do research if you're only going to be able to lose money.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if anybody else has a comment, but the interesting thing about this graph, so Christian, did you have something you're saying that you said something was crazy? Okay, Gen Z takedown properties because we don't have
Responding to the thing.
okay. Anyway, so this is what happens is that during the life of the patent, you see where marginal revenue crosses marginal cost. That's a profit maximizing quantity. And then they charge this high price. But then eventually the patent expires and then the price drops down to the marginal cost. And then the quantity becomes where demand and marginal cost intersect. Okay. So the nice thing about like these people that developed the hepatitis C treatment is, yeah, they can make money hand over fist for a while to recover some of their costs and maybe make a good profit because they got lucky or they got the magic formula. But eventually their patent will expire. And now, like you can go to Target and you can get like generic Claritin and stuff like that. So are you still there, Edward?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever take Claritin?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I am, I die from allergies. I have since I was a kid. And Claritin was the first thing that came out that wouldn't make you sleepy that you could take on a regular basis. And it was under patent. And, I used to pay my copay because it wasn't covered by insurance. I used to pay $100 a month for 30 pills of Claritin. And then eventually the patent expired. And now I can go to Costco and I can get 300 pills for $20.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know what you think about this, but this is the way that it works. You can be a monopolist for a while with a medication, and then eventually the price drops down to the marginal cost. So,
but if they just can't they just like repatent it and like renew it?
No, because the patent is on the magic formula, and then the patent expires, and that formula becomes public. And they can't do anything about that. Now, what they do sometimes, like, I don't know if you know, but like my doctor tried to switch me from Claritin to something called Clarinex, which was like a reformulated version. It wasn't the same formula, but it was supposed to like last longer and be better than Claritin. So they can modify the formula and then they can patent that one, but people still have access to the old one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's kind of like, I don't know, playing, Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You can get it on Steam for, 99 cents. But if you want, the newest one, then you gotta, that's more expensive. So there are lots of drugs that have been around for a long time that are really cheap, that are now in generic, that are used to be patented. And those formulas are still available. They can't extend the patent. The law doesn't allow that. Okay, so then we go to the competitive quantity. More is generated and the price is lower. So that's the way it works. Okay, the welfare costs of monopoly. So economists generally are opposed to monopoly. And despite the fact that we understand this incentive to do research for pharmaceutical manufacturers, but generally what economists worry about is the small number of transactions because of the high price. And the way that we characterize that, and you guys might remember this in the context of taxes, the real problem with taxes was what we would call economic inefficiency or deadweight loss. And so it's not that we or the economics profession is against the idea of profits. We expect companies are trying to make profits, and that provides a good incentive for distributing, making resources. But the thing I want to leave you guys with is that so this is a competitive market example, and you can see all the stuff on the left-hand side where the value to buyers is greater than the costs to the monopolists. And this is where we would see total surplus. And on the right side, you would have negative total surplus. So you wouldn't want to go past the efficient quantity. But this is the graph that illustrates deadweight loss. Okay. So monopolies generate deadweight losses, or they cause consumer and producer surplus to be smaller than they otherwise would be. It's a loss of total surplus. And because of that, economists think that most industries are better organized as competitive industries as opposed to monopolies because they'll be more efficient. Look at the x-axis where it has the monopoly quantity and the efficient quantity. So, and that's all we have time for today. So I'm gonna stop sharing right there, okay? And I'll ask, let's see.